One of the other points of Obama's financial regulatory reform proposal that you say is a failure is the failure to deter credit default swaps and other casino capitalist gambles. You pointed out that Mr. Obama proposes that loan originators keep a token 5% on their books only.
There's been a large discussion in the financial press over whether computerized trading, whether speculative trading, for instance, in oil and other products, whether the whole idea of default insurance swaps and derivatives and gambling really helps the economy at all, or whether it's really just gambling, and instead of gambling on which way interest rates or exchange rates or stock prices might go, how is that different from gambling on who's going to win the next baseball game or win the next horse race? And the idea is, should Wall Street be essentially conducting all of this activity by huge computers in trillions of dollars of derivatives and bets as a way of making money? Is that how we want America to make money? Or do we want the economy to make money by investing in capital equipment and factories and farms that employ people and actually produce something? The Wall Street says, well, wait a minute, when we're making profits by essentially gambling on which way derivatives are going and which way oil prices are going, we're buying oil not to use in gas tanks and not to make energy out of. We're buying oil to create a shortage and drive up the price so we can make a capital gain trading on it. And we want to make sure that you give us a tax break on this, and you may tax industry, and you may tax factories, and you may tax people, but don't tax the winners. And by the way, if we make a big loss and can't pay the winners, like AIG tried to insure the gamblers who lost, that the government is going to come in and they're going to pay essentially all the winners in the casinos that go bankrupt, so that everybody gets paid at public expense from this kind of gambling. Is that the kind of economy we want? And Obama's advisors say, yes, that's the post-industrial economy. That's what we want.
But another point that you make about Obama's proposal, one of the failings, is the failure to reform the tax system that has distorted the financial system to promote predatory extractive debt, not productive industrial credit.
The tax system in America has been under attack ever since the income tax came in 1913. Originally, the income tax fell on the wealthy. It was really a tax on the returns to wealth. Only 1% of the population actually had to file an income tax return. And most of the income, if you earned less than, say, about $102,000 today, you didn't have to even file a return. So the tax was paid largely by the real estate and financial interests and the insurance interest. Well, for the last century, the wealthy part of the population have chipped away. They've paid lobbyists to write a small print into the tax code that favors almost every kind of income that wealth gets and that the bulk of the population doesn't get. So what we have is a huge shift of the tax burden off property and off finance onto labor. And that's the real problem, that what has created this financial twist of our system and distortion of our system is the fact that absentee-owned property is largely tax-exempt. Finance is tax-exempt. Industry is not tax-exempt, and labor isn't tax-exempt. So we've turned America from a low-cost economy into a high-cost economy. And by privatizing the public domain, we've turned what used to be user fees or services produced freely, like roads and transportation, into rent gouging exercises. We've sold off the public domain and let buyers buy on credit railroads and other public infrastructure, charge whatever the market would bear, raise the cost of doing business, raise the cost of living, and because they financed it all with debt, they count debt as a tax deductible expense, and they don't have to pay income tax on on money that they pay out in interest. So instead of favoring an equity economy, a savings economy, the tax code favors a debt leveraging economy. Let's look at what's happening in California now, for instance, as an example. California, like many other states, has a budget condition where it has to be in balance. Now, years ago in the 1970s, California passed Proposition 13. This limited the property tax to rise only 1% a year. Well, property, meanwhile, in California has risen at anywhere from 8% to 10% a year, and the effect of Proposition 13 has been a huge giveaway largely to commercial property and to the property of the wealthy. So unable to tax property, which is sort of the free rent, California has left all of this rental value of real estate, homes and office buildings, to be paid out to banks as interest on loans taken out to buy the property. So it costs just as much to operate and to get a home or an office building or a company under the low property tax today as it would have cost under the high tax property, except that instead of paying a property tax that goes to finance California's budget and pay for the education, the high cost goes to pay the banks in interest, so California has to make up the amount of money somewhere else by taxing the labor and taxing at industry and causing unemployment. And in the final instance, when it's not able to tax property, what does it do? It cuts back what used to be one of the best educational systems in the country to very low. It cuts back public spending. It cuts back medical spending. And the result is to reduce the Californian state economy to debt peonage. So California is very much in the position of Iceland or Latvia.
Yes, and in addition to what you have listed, they're gouging all the way down to parking meters. The sales tax has gone up. And, of course, then a lot of the infrastructure is going to be privatized, don't you think?
That seems to be happening. In Chicago also they've been privatizing parking meters and everything, so that somehow things that used to be free are now being paid to private enterprises. If the government can't raise funds to perform its basic public sector duties, then it has to sell off the public domain to private buyers, and the private buyers prefer to buy any kind of a public enterprise or a right, like the streets or parking rights or roads, to turn them into toll roads, to put toll booths and parking meters everywhere they can over the economy, over the electric system, over the train system, the transport system, the airwaves, everything that the government used to provide in the progressive era as public infrastructure that made America the most competitive economy in the world. It's now loading down with privatized debt payments to the banking system, and then it says, look at all the wealth we're creating. If the government owned these roads, this wouldn't be part of the private wealth, which is all they look at. This would be zero wealth on the national balance sheet. But once we sell it on credit to somebody who borrows the money, it's worth as much money as a bank will lend against it. So that's what I said at the beginning of the talk, saying that the value of a house or a company or a toll road or a street that you can put parking meters on is however much a bank will lend against it, and a interest-bearing capacity of any asset is what's looked at as wealth. Well, the reality is that debt isn't wealth, debt is debt. Debt is the antithesis of wealth, and somehow there's been an inversion, a turning inside out or upside down of the whole idea of what wealth is, and now the idea is saying that debt is wealth. Well, that's like saying that war is peace.
And isn't it also true that when the infrastructure is privatized, the people that buy it are borrowing the money from a bank to buy it, and then the interest they have to pay on these loans is tax deductible?
That's right, and in fact they may borrow it for themselves. For instance, in Iceland, Iceland had hoped that when it turned over its geothermic power to alcan and to aluminum plants, that this would be a natural resource and it would get part of the economic rent from the cheap energy that it provides to make electricity. Basically, aluminum is made out of electricity because it's made out of clay, and clay is everywhere, but what isn't anywhere is electricity. Well, it turns out that Alcan arranged to borrow the money to debt leverage from one of its other affiliates in one of the offshore banking enclaves, where